Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Alan Singer. I'm a professor at Hofstra University.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Raymond Peterson.
And we're pre-taping, I guess, the Wednesday before our Monday air date. And once again, Dr. Singer has graced us with his presence. Welcome, Alan. This show is again brought to you by the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. And as I said before, I'm Eric Tait. So, Alan, you're joining us because you wrote a Huffington Post blog.
Daily Cos.
Daily Cos, okay.
Yeah.
I have to keep your different posts straight. Well, just jump into it. What was the subject, and why did you feel the need to write that post?
I came across a letter to the editor of the New York Times that was co-signed by Albert Einstein and 26 other prominent American Jews.
And that letter was written in what year?
December 1948.
Bingo.
And they wrote the letter objecting to the new Israeli government's policy in Palestine.
And that's because in 1948, that was the new state that had just been set up, correct?
Yes,
That's
two new
the year.
states were set up by the United Nations, and what concerned Einstein and the others were what they considered to be essentially fascist tactics by forces in Israel. And one of the things that was happening is they were driving Arabs out of their villages, out of their communities, to establish essentially Arab-free zones. And Einstein and the others accused celebrated leaders of Israel of essentially being terrorists. And they were upset that the United States government were accepting this behavior, and they wanted to protest.
Now, I'm assuming that letter piqued your interest because of the situation that's been going on the West Bank and primarily on the Gaza Strip on the border with Israel.
One of the things that I'm sure people are aware that the United States moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and it's the only major nation to have done so. And this contributed to a series of protests in the Gaza Strip. And Gaza is a narrow area, way overpopulated, that is essentially a place that Israel has maintained as a giant prison camp for Palestinians who were displaced from their homes during the 47-48 war.
Just before we expand on that more, one of the key things I want to remind people is that the day that they moved that embassy was the exact anniversary of the day that those Palestinians were displaced from that same territory to make way for the state of Israel.
Interesting.
So the fact that the United States State Department and the Israeli government, quote, colluded to make that the day for moving that embassy speaks to the total lack of concern for the historical significance, the fate, and the lives of those Palestinians. So to pick up where you were.
Israeli Independence Day is May 14th. May 15th is Nakba, the day of catastrophe for the Palestinians.
Right.
So what the Palestinians did is, in Gaza, is they launched a series of marches demanding the right of return to villages where they had been displaced. And Israeli, on the border, opened fire with live ammunition. And approximately 60 Palestinians were murdered, and thousands were wounded.
Now, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we, and Raymond, even before this day of 60, hadn't there been demonstrations in Gaza leading up to this where a journalist was killed? We were covering that story, where at least 37 people had been slain and thousands already injured because the Israelis were using live fire. This is the month leading up to this particular thing.
Right. A number of outlets were talking about, and I've forgotten the journalist's name, unfortunately, but talking about how the journalist died and it essentially wasn't covered. we had to go to alternate, I can leave that there, alternate media, not the major, to report and get news of this journalist who died doing his job.
Yeah.
Trying to-
These things are seldom reported, though. I mean, deaths that I'm sure there are more than we've heard about.
Right.
You know, with 37, if they're firing live rounds, you know,
We knew what was
indiscriminately.
coming. We knew that the unrest and the killings would be coming, and then we get feedback from, I hate listening to the spokesperson for the White House saying that there's no connection between the moving of the embassy and the violence in Gaza. I don't know how you can make that connection. And you listen to her and you look in her eyes and you wonder if she believes a word of what she says.
Well, one thing is the media is not buying it so rapidly anymore.
Right.
This is the front page of the Daily News, and it shows Ivanka Trump, kind of like Vanna White, pointing towards the embassy. And the headline is Daddy's Little Ghoul.
Yes.
Because here she is with this plastic smile, hands out. Well, thousands of people are being shot at,
Right.
and
60
people are
dead.
being killed. And this announces 55 slaughtered. That was the original count. And again, this absolutely blew
This is
my
the
mind.
day of the opening of the
Right.
embassy.
With
This
all-
is what all going on.
With all of the violence is being reported. It's not like they couldn't have known about it.
Oh, they knew about it.
Yeah.
They're taking a selfie in front of the embassy with the Israeli Prime Minister, his wife, Ivanka, and Jared. I mean, Jared is supposed to be the United States representative in the Middle East, and he is clueless.
He's proven himself to be clueless.
Yeah.
Now you're going to make us laugh about that.
But it's harder and harder to hide it. I mean,
Yes.
the Daily News is not like the left-wing press. It's not like the
No.
New York Times.
No.
And they've had enough. And
Yes.
I think the world is becoming outraged at this.
Yes, that's the work of the editor who came back, Mr. Rich. He returned as editor of the Daily News. He's been running headline front pages like this because he's driving in that type of point over and over again. Daily News is a tabloid. That's what it does. But this was so upsetting and so outrageous that you had that type of headline, that the front page.
Raymond, what was the other story that you had brought to our attention from the Washington Post? No,
gonna have to
talk about
find
whatever
that.
else you were talking about. Maybe I can find that link.
No, I was gonna say, what do we expect from a nation that, according to the letter that Einstein and the others wrote, they described Menachem Begin as a fascist in that letter. So why weren't we
Quote
paying
it.
attention?
If you got it up there, just quote the line.
I don't have. What I
Oh.
do have is. Israelis celebrate May 14th as Independence Day for Palestinians forced from their lands. May 15th is Nakba Day, or the Day of Catastrophe.
Right.
Menachem Begin, who was described in the letter as a fascist and a representative of, quote, a terrorist right-wing chauvinist organization, end quote, was Prime Minister of Israel from 1977 to 1983. But, if they're saying this in 1947.
Yeah.
We had plenty of time to deal with a fascist state, but yet we embraced them and continue to do so to this day. I've heard no condemnation of people being killed from our government.
Not from the White House.
And
Yes.
I have to say, and again, mainstream press, the New York Times, I've been a little disappointed, but 3 of their op-ed writers actually blamed the Palestinians for the murders.
It's absurd.
They said
Yeah.
that they provoked it.
Yes.
And I'm reading it, and this is Tom Friedman, Brett Stevens, and Barry Weiss took the same position on the Bill Maher show, and Bill Maher agreed. And I'm looking at these things, and I'm saying Hamas was not firing live bullets.
Right.
And I'm thinking of the civil rights marches in the United States.
Absolutely.
I went to marches, and there were police up there, and there were soldiers up there with machine guns. They didn't fire on us. But can you imagine if they opened fire and they said, well, we were provoked
Right.
because they were breaking the law?
Yeah.
And again, they're blaming the victims here. It's a difficult situation. I believe Israel has a right to exist. But I don't believe Israel has a right to occupy the West Bank, and I don't believe Israel has the right to blockade Gaza and essentially keep people in a giant prison camp.
And we were just having
They
this
don't, but-
discussion before we went on air. We said that, I was saying that there might be peace in the Middle East at some point, but it won't be with Netanyahu, it won't be with Hamas, and it won't be with this administration. It will be with people with fresh ideas and might have to come from an innocuous party like the Netherlands. I don't know, some nation that has nothing to do with it actually can sit down and moderate some type of deal.
You know, I believe that Netanyahu is, first of all, that Israel is not a friend of the United States, at least this Israeli government. And Netanyahu is
I'm glad you
playing
made that
Trump.
distinction.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
no,
glad
it's
you did
important.
too.
I actually have family there, and who don't agree with these policies.
Oh,
But,
please. Oh, sorry,
they're
guys.
playing Trump because Trump Trump
I can't say
plays
Turn it
to-
off.
I can't.
There you go.
There
Trump
we
plays
go.
to his audience and he plays to his base. And his base are evangelical Christians who view the Israeli policies as signaling the second coming of Jesus. And he's playing to Jews who are concerned that there be a homeland. And so what he does is that leaves him vulnerable to Netanyahu doing outrageous things and really going over his head to his base. And I have to say, as an American Jew, I'm not confident that evangelical Christians have my best interests at heart.
I don't think they do either.
You're
They actually had evangelical Christian preachers at the embassy opening, and they were quoted in the past as saying, "Well, Jews are going to burn in hell." And
Yeah, well, there was an interesting Sunday, New York Times, Sunday, May 20th, front page, left column headline, Israeli appeal to evangelicals stirs backlash. And the article is by David D. Kirkpatrick, Elizabeth Diaz, and David M. Halfinger.
Damn it.
And
There's a story that I'm
the
trying to
lead
pull up.
paragraph is, a night after the dedication of the new United States Embassy in Jerusalem, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel convened American evangelicals to plan their next steps. And so the bottom line is Netanyahu has a campaign
yes.
on, because he's made a concerted effort to go after the support of the evangelicals. And the article goes on to talk about, okay, what country is going to be next to get the evangelicals in that country to force their politicians to move those embassies from Tel Aviv to
Interesting.
Jerusalem. And these Central American countries with strong evangelical movements, those were that's who he was telling these American evangelicals to
Okay.
focus their attention on, so that that pressure could be brought. And so for me, Netanyahu has been emboldened by Donald Trump. And because Donald Trump needed to appease his base and said, I'm going to fulfill my campaign promise, other people have made that promise and studied what the ramifications were of the president and said, that's not in the best interest of peace in the Middle East or trying to get to a two-state solution. And so they have said, you know what? Yeah, if we can ever get this two-state solution squared away, then we can talk about moving those capitals. This guy just said, we're going to move it.
Yeah.
And so he says that his evangelical base says, yeah, do it or else. And Netanyahu says, yeah, definitely do it. And Donald Trump, because he and Netanyahu, as far as I'm concerned, are two peas in a pod. Netanyahu, as far as I'm concerned, commits crimes against humanity every time the Palestinians are shot down with live fire when they're demonstrating. I mean, that's just me personally watching what's going on, not just as a journalist, but as a human being. That's crime against humanity.
I see
That's
rubber
murder.
bullets and tear
Okay?
gas, but I don't see live fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. you know.
Donald Trump, for me, is committing crimes against humanity when he tells his Homeland Security people to, you take these babies that are coming in with people seeking asylum from their mothers, and you throw them and warehouse them in some camp separate from their mothers, and who knows whether they're going to be permanently separated when you deport the parents while these kids are in limbo. And so, for me, even though he's not killing them, he's totally destroying their lives. So, two peas in a pod, both, from my way of watching their actions, are both bullies. And guess what? They're both under investigation for all kinds of chicanery and money laundering and dealing stuff with dealing with other people's money or dealing with money in ways that they shouldn't. So, as far as I'm concerned, they are symbiotic people who reinforce each other, and they reinforce each other to the detriment of the Middle East and the Palestinians.
I was talking with that Iranian friend, and the whole strategy there doesn't make any sense. It's not a rational strategy. We're pulling out of the nuclear agreement.
But well, the strategy is to eliminate the Arabs. I mean, that's the strategy as far as I see it. There is no strategy. It's let's get rid of them as we can. They can't go out and gas or shoot all of them, but as they rise up in protest, they can mow them down a little bit.
They're going to rise up again. It's not.
Of course, they're going to rise up. You know, it's they have a right to the land as well, and they've been displaced. They've been abused. They keep getting pushed back further and further. I mean, I can't imagine what the Gaza is like right now. It's got to be like really overcrowded. Poverty's got to be incredible. It's
Tom
insane.
Friedman
They're never
said it's going to
give
get
up.
worse very quickly. Friedman, today's Times, said that the infrastructure is so bad that raw sewage is being dumped into the sea. But at the same time, their aquifilter is draining of fresh water, so that seawater that's infested with disease is coming back into the aquifilter.
That's bad.
And he's saying cholera and typhoid are going to just spread out throughout the whole strip in a very soon.
Then that's the way they get rid of them, isn't it?
That's
Poison
terrible.
them.
I mean, if there's
Through their natural
there's the
resources.
safety issue, there's the overcrowding issue, and now you're saying that there's a major health issue, literally bubbling up
Yes.
from below.
From the
amazing.
aquifilter.
And I didn't know
I'm
that.
amazed by
That was
Yeah,
just
no,
that
I
just
didn't.
came out today.
Friedman, this is like Wednesday before our Monday taping. That's today's main headline. Okay.
And that's the kind of
25th.
Reporting I like to
May
hear when
25th.
somebody does that extra digging. And like the historical letter that you dug out, it always gives a good reference to current affairs. It's
I'm glad. It seems like the media is beginning to pay attention again.
Yeah.
You know, doing their due diligence and getting to the bottom of things. I'm not as well as it did at one time,
Right.
but it's coming back into the
right.
fold, I think. And I'm glad to see that. I don't know if that's due to new blood or some of the old timers getting up and saying, "Hey, you know, this is not right. We have to do something about
Well,
this."
I didn't actually read the story, but that because stuff backed up on me. But that headline you sent from the Washington Post, which I found,
why
said
they can't give up?
Palestinians have no choice but to continue the struggle.
Right.
Now, if you're living in, quote, a concentration camp, all right,
You have-
and you have no infrastructure, you have no jobs, you have no, and guess what? They've been living under a blockade
Mhm.
on Gaza that's being enforced by the Egyptians and the Israelis. And so their economy has been totally decimated.
Right.
And so this headline is an understatement. Have no choice but to continue in their struggle, because they can't continue to live like that.
No.
Basically, to go back to what we talked about earlier before we started rolling, the Israelis are treating the Palestinians, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza, the way the South Africans treated the blacks in South Africa in those apartheid townships.
The way
Okay?
the Nazis treated the Jews in Europe.
Well, the Nazis tried to exterminate the Jews.
I know.
That's
They're
what-
just
yeah,
stopping
yeah,
short of
yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
We
when
have to
you
make that
use-
distinction.
Yes.
use live fire,
Yeah.
whether you say you're
Yeah.
trying to exterminate
Yeah.
them, guess what?
Yeah.
You are de facto exterminating them.
Oh.
And then when you put the blame on them for demonstrating for their lost land or for against their horrific living conditions,
Right.
then guess what? I like I said, this man, I'm not going to try to put Netanyahu's actions on the entire Israeli population,
Right.
but the fact that the Israelis keep him in office and don't push to get him out, that means they're pretty much in support of his policies.
But in the same
Well-
way that we hope the rest of the world doesn't blame America for
Right, for
what our
Trump.
leader does, I hope the rest of the world is bright enough to understand that we have a problem at the top. You know, the people are, you know, we're not.
Yeah, but,
this isn't
but
the-
what he's doing is affecting the rest
Absolutely.
of the world.
Yes.
You know, so
and he's the leader.
Yeah.
It keeps the world at a tinderbox. Look, what you raised about Egypt, I think, is important. Egypt has its own domestic turmoil, and
Right.
so
Right.
Egypt is trying to hold the Palestinians in check there because it doesn't want to feed into turmoil within its own society.
Right.
But I mean, we see it all over the Middle East. One of the things that struck me, and I was in the class I was doing, is that if you look at a lot of the war zones stretching from West Africa, Nigeria, across into Afghanistan, they are all areas that have been deeply affected by climate change. They are all areas that are drying out and water resources are becoming scarce and food supplies are being diminished. And again, we're looking at a growing global catastrophe because of pressures of climate change in those regions.
Wow.
And again, the Trump administration has withdrawn from climate control.
Right, exactly, which doesn't help anything. But simply because we were talking about the press getting better at least reporting this, I mean, I'm getting the same feeling myself. I mean, I like to use sports analogies. You get hit with enough right hands, you watch for the next one, then you throw the counter right. And you hope that it hits, you hope you hit your mark. And that's what I see happening. We know what these folks are made of now. We know what the Trump administration probably has coming, and so we wait for that big vote, that big executive order to come down, but we're ready with a counterpunch. That's what I see happening in the coverage. Well, at least we're getting smarter at either researching or pushing back quicker than it was at the beginning of the administration.
Okay,
Yes,
based on what you just said about we're getting smarter, we know what these people are capable of and what they're doing, that's a perfect segue to at least do a quick exploration of Donald Trump and his people who are now continuing their assault on the Constitution.
Yes.
As we speak, in the middle of this week, by next Monday, when this show airs, who knows what Donald Trump and the Republican Party will be demanding of the Justice Department. Anybody care to at least tell our viewers how bad the situation got last week?
All right.
We're dumbfounded.
We yield to
we're
the expert.
dumbfounded, folks.
Yes.
All right. The latest that I understand is that Trump has counterattacked against the FBI because the FBI was when it was investigating foreign influence in the campaign, apparently sent undercover people in to investigate.
Right.
He's now saying this was a mole designed to undermine his campaign. And again, counterattack after counterattack. But just on this notion of foreign involvement in American electoral process, isn't what Netanyahu is doing also illegal? I look at it and I say, isn't Netanyahu interfering with American domestic policy? And when will the Israeli government be called on that? And when will politicians like Chuck Schumer be forced to answer the fact that they have become agents of the Israeli government? That's illegal.
That's
I agree. I'm
Yes.
not going to try to dispute that. The bottom line is, when Netanyahu came over and proceeded to try to influence the congressional deliberations on the policies pertaining to the Palestinian situation, he definitely was meddling in our
Of course.
domestic politics, but our foreign affairs. And so,
The same funders of Netanyahu were also the funders of Trump. People like Sheldon Adelson.
Those are the people who were there for the celebration of the
Adelson, I know.
of the embassy.
Was there a precedent for a foreign dignitary to address the Senate? I mean, that's what happened when he came over.
on live legislation.
Oh yeah.
But
Had that ever happened before?
We covered it on Media Watch when it actually happened. He bypassed the protocol or somebody bypassed
That's
the
right.
protocol
That's right.
to invite him
That's right.
to do
Right,
X,
that
Y,
was-
and Z.
That's,
We
that,
covered it on
that's what it
Media Watch.
was. It was a
We
bypass.
covered
yeah.
it on Media
Yes.
Watch, and that's what that's exactly what we were referring to
Yeah.
about him
Yeah.
interfering in our domestic affairs that are tied to foreign policy.
And we have 3 minutes.
So, look, whether Bob Mueller's investigation continues unhampered because of this new assault,
Yeah.
Trump is saying investigate the investigators, except that the president is not supposed to tell the Justice Department what to do when the Justice Department is investigating the president. Okay? But that's exactly what happened, folks. In the shorthand, the president has told the Justice Department to investigate the investigators of him when they're investigating him for possible crimes.
Yes.
But
Okay.
it's legal for him to do that, isn't it?
No, it's not.
No, it's not?
No, that's what Rudy
is-
Giuliani is trying to tell you. You cannot listen to Rudy Giuliani.
No, I wasn't listening
Yeah.
to Rudy
You have to but
Giuliani.
you
I
see,
saw that in a
that's-
subhead.
That
somewhere.
is what Alan was just saying. This is their counterattack. They
Right.
throw out all kinds of BS stuff, and guess what? You big lie, the Nazi big lie. You repeat the big lie over and over again. That's what Trump and his people do.
Oh, I know.
But
of
here's
course.
the point: the fact that the people in Congress knows that this is illegal and should not be doing it, are still going along with it. At least the Republicans are. The Democrats are crying foul, but they're not in power. So you've got Republicans
Not yet.
rolling over and definitely letting this guy do whatever he wants, even though he's destroying any firewall between the executive branch and the
Right.
Justice Department. And that's an assault on the Constitution. We got about a minute. I don't know.
We have about a minute, yes,
Yeah.
minute 15 seconds.
So
And just for the record, don't bother listening to Rudy Giuliani. He's been a total train.
No, I don't know.
He's
No,
been
no,
he's
no,
been
no,
a
no,
train
no.
wreck.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say
No,
that.
the guy's
but-
lost his
Well,
mind.
this got to get a story straight. You're
don't-
on
Yeah.
the team.
Yeah.
we don't. But remember,
Yes.
folks, he was brought on to do exactly what he's doing.
What he's doing, yeah.
Being
Yeah,
a Trump
yeah.
megaphone, spouting lies and what do you call it? Propaganda and false information, so that the Trump base can keep hearing that.
Yeah.
So when the real story comes out, they say, "Well, I don't believe that. This guy said it wasn't so." So anyway,
What I'm worried
Stop
about.
listening to
we,
him.
we're out of time.
Okay. We have 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
In 40 seconds.
Very quick. I'm just worried democracy is a fragile thing. And
is,
I
apparently.
really worry what will happen as court systems are undermined, as legal systems are undermined. I'm not a friend of the FBI. I'm not a friend of,
another issue.
of many
That's
things.
another issue.
But I'm
Yeah.
very upset, very worried about the threats to democracy
20
and
seconds.
human rights in the United States.
Yeah. And so we bypassed our new feature, Being Black in America, because we ran out of time, but we'll pick it up on it the next time. This has been Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
Alan Singer.
Bob Anthony
Raymond Peterson.
And catch us on YouTube
at Media Watch EVT.
and Twitter, Media Watch EVT.
Yes.
And folks, we'll catch you the next time.